Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. This is our third talk in our Summer Undergraduate Virtual Open Day series. My name is Alex Hawkins, I'm the Admissions and Enrolment Manager here at the Courtauld, and I have the pleasure to be joined by my esteemed colleague, Dr. Suzanne Babai. I don't know if, Suzanne, you don't know if you want to say a few words about yourself and your role here at the Courtauld.
Thank you. I just had to unmute, as is the case in this instance. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Suzanne Babai. I teach at the Courtauld on the subject of Islamic arts and architecture with a focus on the Iranian world, the Persian-speaking side of West Asia and South Asia. And I have served as the head of BA admissions for 3 years, very recently actually. And I'm here because I can perhaps help you with some of the issues that you will be facing in regards to applications through UCAS and to us in particular.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. So this is the first time we've dedicated a session to the kind of UCAS application itself and the personal statement. As I said earlier, this is the third in a series. The first event was to tell you more about the Courtauld itself and provide an overview of the BA History of Art programme. The second event was about studying history of art for the first time. You can find the recordings for both of these sessions on our website. If you haven't already, I'd encourage you to explore the Undergraduate Virtual Open Day Hub, which has a range of resources, such as talks, blogs, events, and more. So you can find out what it's like to study here at the Courtauld and some of the relevant information that will help you make that decision. We'll also be hosting a pre-Q&A applicant webinar in the winter. You can answer any questions that you may have at that point. We'll, at the end of this session, have a Q&A session too. So there's really a lot of opportunities to ask us questions and beyond just sending us an email or getting hold of us in other ways. This is we find this a really engaging way of kind of answering questions directly. So just to give you a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today, I'm going to, as the slide here indicates, talk a little bit about our entry requirements, recap some of the information briefly that we've given in our previous sessions, before talking about UCAS itself and the UCAS application in a more general way. And then I'll hand over to Suzanne, who will talk you through some of our guidance about the personal statement, some of the advice that we can give you and what we're looking for. And then, as I say, we'll end with Q&As. It should be about half an hour, 40 minutes of presentation, and then we'll have the rest of the time left in the hour to go through any questions you may have. So, as I said, to recap entry requirements, typically in the majority of our students will come to us with A-levels. We have a range of AAA to ABB, and this range really indicates that we are quite flexible in what we're looking at, and that goes to subjects as well as a range of experience. And key and something that we touched upon in our last session is the prior study of the subject itself. History of art is not required. We really value and look for students who have a varied range of subjects. We feel like it really brings a lot to the program and to the cohort, your peers in the program when you're studying. There's some other qualifications here, the IB, where we look for a minimum of 35 points overall. But if you have any other questions about international qualifications, there is a list on the website, but you can always drop us an email. It's the best way, especially if you have individual kind of questions or circumstances. And me and my team are always happy to get back to you as soon as we can with an idea or ask further questions that we may have too. You can find more information on the website about our contextual offers too. It's something that we're using more and more often, where we, up to 2 grades lower may make offers to students from underrepresented backgrounds, such as mature students, students with disabilities and care leavers. But as I say, there's more information on those kind of conditional offers on the website. So let's start to talk about and look at this session as a whole here and get into some details. So first of all, we're going to talk about UCAS itself, the Universities and Colleges Admissions Services. UCAS operates the admissions process for the overwhelming majority of undergraduate programs within UK universities. You can apply for up to 5 courses, same or similar, initially in no order of preference. When completing a UCAS application, you ultimately need to provide some personal details, your full education history to date, any employment history, your personal statement, 1 reference. And for those of you not applying via a school in the UK, sometimes an application fee too. We'll be covering the personal statement, the kind of focus of our session today, in more detail momentarily. So, give you an idea of the full requirements of the UCAS application form here. The best resource for some of the other bits here outside of the personal statement and kind of as an overall guide to the full application form, really UCAS themselves are the best resource for this. So you can see exactly what kind of information you need to provide in advance. But this screen here gives you an overview of really everything that is part of the form. The typical UCAS timeline, and obviously the past year things have been moved around a little bit, but this generally in a year that isn't impacted by something like the global pandemic at the moment, these key dates are typically what you would see. So you have the date that students can submit applications for the year ahead. Oxford, Cambridge, and some medical related subjects have an earlier deadline, 15th of October, but the general deadline for the majority of universities is the 15th of January. Then from the 15th of January onwards, particularly in the Courtaulds case, in kind of late January to February, it's a time that we review the overwhelming majority of the applications that we receive and start getting in touch with students with the results of their application. And then you have until mid-June to accept or decline your offers. And in doing so, that's when you make choices about your firm choice or your insurance choice. Then in mid-August is when the majority of results in the UK are released. It's kind of confirmation and clearing an adjustment. Sometimes the Courtauld goes into clearing an adjustment for a few extra spaces. This last year we did not. And that's really the overview, the kind of key beginning to end of the application process itself. So before I pass on to Suzanne, I'm just going to give you a kind of overview of what we take from the UCAS application and what we focus on. And this isn't necessarily guidance that will be suitable for all universities, although in the main it will be. We really do focus on your predicted grades if you haven't finished yet, or your completed grades if you have, kind of linking through to your overall academic performance. Then we place a great deal of emphasis on the personal statement, and then the reference, your referee. I'll give a brief kind of idea of what we think about the reference before passing to Suzanne. It's really important to choose somebody who can write well about you, write persuasively about you, and attest to your academic skills. For the most part, if you're applying from a school in the UK, the issue of your referee and your reference will be taken care of. If you're applying as a mature student or a student in the EU or an international student, then you'll need to pick a referee. And so do give some thought to it. It is important, and we do look often for referees to give us some contextual information about you, where you studied, what your school is like. So it's an important part of the application. And then just to say that as a small specialist institution, we are really lucky to have the ability to look at every application in great detail and decide on a case-by-case basis. That goes some way to explaining how we can be flexible, but still expecting high standards. It's something we really pride ourselves in, the ability for us to delve into each application. It gives a huge advantage to us, but also to you, and it gives you an opportunity to really think about how you're presenting yourself. And to that end, I will pass on to Suzanne to talk about the personal statement and our guidance around that. Thank you.
Hi again. I just wanted to start with first telling you not only my experience in reading hundreds of personal statements, but also what we as teachers in the BA program see in the students, and how those statements actually lead to what we find with our students in BA 1, 2, and 3. I teach at all those levels, and I teach largely segments, modules that deal with the Islamic world, Islamic arts, and both early modern and contemporary material from the Middle East. So the range is varied, and we are all involved in the teaching of the BA students. It's not a specialized subject area. Art history is specialized, but not as yet when you enter so narrowly focused. So I want to focus this segment's attention on your personal statements, in large part because we put so much value on this. We read every single personal statement with great care, looking for signs of your interest in the subject, your curiosity about the subject. This is not just about us, everyone. This is a UCAS general practice. We want to see evidence of your ability to write well, persuasively, clearly. We want to see that you are suited to the course that you have chosen, and we want to hear any personal circumstances that might have impacted your education. So all of these make up for the general statement regarding your personal point brought across. And one thing for you to remember is that the personal statement is 4,000 characters. It's not very long. It's about 47 lines long. So with that in mind, what I want to do then is turn to the specifics for the courtauld, actually. In other words, personal statements and their courtauld application. What we look for in your personal statement, we at the courtauld, is actually your alertness to the fact that we all live in a very rich visual world. And this is from posters and banners to buildings and works of art, to what you see on television, advertisement, graphic novels, video games, fashion, you name it. It's so vast that it's nowadays really hard to contain the list, in fact, of what surrounds us. We want to know what really interests you in visual material surrounding you. You don't have to talk about everything, but we want to have very sort of thoughtful explanation of what really interests you in the visual material. We want to know your understanding of visual materials, how you've been perhaps affected by having read an article or a book that deals with the visual material. And we are not talking about art history alone. So it doesn't really matter if you haven't had, it really doesn't matter if you haven't had art history in your earlier education. What we want to know is how much you have a passion and interest, and how exactly you've come to it. We want to get something about a description of why you've become interested in this particular subject matter, and what are you looking forward to in studying the history of art at the university level. We want you to give us some sense of how you think analytically. What are the kinds of skills that you bring to the study of the works of art or other objects and subjects in this particular field, the field of art history at the university level, and what has prepared you for this actually. So very specific, very clear statements and explanations of what has brought you to this point actually. We also want to know from especially students from EU and other places, international students, we want to know about their language skills. We want to know why they want to study in the UK at a university, and if there is something that makes them stand out in their application actually. Above all of that, the personal statement is actually about a very clear picture that you draw for us of you as an individual, what motivates you, what ambitions you have, and show us your potential to benefit from a degree in the field of art history at a specialized institution like the Courtauld. And in the way we assess the personal statements, it's good to go, if you find it relevant as well, to go into, for instance, a work experience or a volunteer thing or some competitions and clubs and societies, if they are relevant actually, and things such as the Duke of Edinburgh Awards and so forth. We are particularly interested in knowing, and I would encourage you to say something about taster courses you might have taken, placements and summer schools. We have some of those on offer at the Courtauld, and if you have taken such courses or participated in such summer programs, you should actually indicate that one on your personal statement. In general, your statement should have a very clear structure. It should be written very succinctly, given the shortness of the length of this, persuasively, and to have an introduction that leads you to a main discussion about some of those issues that make you particularly suited to the program at the Courtauld. And in fact, bring up some of those relevant experiences of the past, voluntary or work, and then conclude the whole thing with, again, a statement that perhaps says why you're suited for this and why we should consider you quite seriously. We consider everyone very seriously with these in mind. A very good case for a personal statement can be made with the strength of that introduction and the conclusion, the way you organize the content of this statement, and you're selective. So you've done a lot of things by the time you come to apply for university, but you want to be selective. Pick the ones that are most relevant. We are not looking for specifically art historical issues. We are not particularly searching for travel experiences, but if they are relevant, by all means, bring them to bear upon this. You could have become very interested in the subject through the visits to the museums, through readings, through very close study and observations of the visual material around you in your city. Any of that really speaks with strength, with persuasion of your passion and interest in the field is really important. And then Your personal statement, just to repeat, should bring in the relevant academic courses, skills, or extracurricular activities you have put in. And finally, and this is a hard thing to advise anyone with, as a teacher, I know this is hard, but we want you to be original, we want you to be yourself, and we want you to be interesting. And those are just to say that we are looking for you, the person behind these pieces of paper. The personal statement plays a hugely important role in that. Your individual position is very important to us. That's the end of my little bit of information.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. That was fantastic. So before we go on to our Q&As, just to give you our social media handles and the best way of getting in touch with us. So you see the UG admissions email address at the bottom there, but also our Twitter, Facebook and Instagram handles, and the Virtual Open Day hub there on the website too. So now we're going to invite you all to submit questions via the chat function on Zoom. They don't have to be related to the content of today's event, although obviously I'm sure lots of you will have questions. And it can be anything related to the course talk. We'll be noting all the questions down and compiling them and putting our responses in written form also on the Virtual Open Day hub. And just giving everybody a few seconds to get questions in. But I also imagine that we probably had a few people who have joined us for all three of our sessions. So in particular, for those who have joined us for all of them, thank you, and we look forward to some more questions from you coming in now. So we have our first few questions coming in. Great. So the first question, and I will read them out and then kind of tackle them myself or pass them over to Suzanne also. The first one is about when we get sent the recording of the meeting by email. So absolutely, we'll be putting it up on the hub by tomorrow at the latest, most likely. So if you go to the Virtual Open Day hub, the link on the page here, that's where the recording of this session will be. So we can just give a few more minutes for questions to come in. People always are furiously typing, I know. So great, we have a question here. Do you require IELTS proof of English proficiency if you've completed the English and English language GCSEs? Actually, I would point you to the English language requirements page of the website in the first instance. Often we are able to point you towards things like, I'm fairly certain that the IGCSEs or the GCSEs in those typically are things that provide proof of English proficiency, but to double check and kind of follow up on that, I would direct you to the English language requirements page of the website.
But also a direct email to PG Admissions to clarify if it's not clear.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, if you send us an email at the UG admissions address there at the bottom of the page that's up at the moment, then we can look, if you've got individual or specific questions about language exemption, there's often a way of finding something that might be relevant or applicable. So absolutely. We have another question come in here. Are there any more online summer courses by the Courtauld? And if not, will there be any more run? For that one, I will defer to our colleague who is sitting here. I would ask you to clarify if you mean the summer school in particular. So by online summer courses, is that the summer school? And yes, that is what they mean. So in that sense, are there any more summer school courses that are told?
If I may interject
Sure.
here, we had our summer school just about maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I took part in it. So it's annually, and you will be able to join next summer. But don't we have some kinds of open days and things of that nature, which potential students can actually take part in? And I was going to suggest as well to keep an eye on what is online and available through the research forum of the Courtauld Institute. There's a lot happening there that is, thanks to COVID, after all, available and very widely diverse material to everyone. So please do look up what's on Research Forum.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. There's a question here about an applicant from a very competitive US high school that does not calculate GPA. What I would suggest is you email us as much information as possible about how your grades are calculated, or what kind of assessment you get, and we will do the legwork of working out if that meets the GPA requirements. So if you send us as much information as possible, maybe a link to the school, or some scans of any transcripts you have to date, then myself and my team will take a look and give you an equivalent kind of GPA and what we'd be looking for, or if it meets our expectations. There's a question here about recommending other courses or summer schools other than the one that is that is available through us. Suzanne, I don't know if you have any insight into that.
I hate to say no, but it's I would imagine that any other program in art history in the country would have some form of a summer school. This is almost mandatory these days for prepping students. Perhaps you can look up at UCL or what might be available at University of St. Andrews, or I'm sorry, I don't really know. Not that we are entirely convinced that ours is the best, but at the very least we focus on it. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't answer that one. I wanted to add something, if I may, for the students from a US high school. I just wanted to say that Alex and many of us are actually very experienced, Alex in particular, in the diverse ways that schools work across the world. So the Courtauld is very international, so we get a lot of different kinds of applications and have ways of learning how to evaluate things. But also you can help by asking your school to help us understand how they evaluate.
Absolutely, yes. Schools, particularly schools that operate slightly outside of the norm, are often very used to providing information to higher education institutions. So if it's not kind of immediately obvious to you, you can often ask your school offices and they'll be able to provide you or provide us with that information. Yeah, that's a great point. So we have a question about today's session here, what the main section of the personal statement should include. So the bit before you talk about work experience, etc. Maybe I'll talk about this one quickly and then pass over to you, Suzanne. So as I read many myself, I think, I guess in terms of, you know, introducing, getting into the main section, that's the first few lines really are key to capturing our attention. So that is often the point where you want to put the best foot forward, the most sort of persuasive thing about yourself and your interest forward that will hook us in and make us want to read more. You don't need to fret so much about it. It doesn't have to be, you know, something really wild or out there, but that's something that I definitely find. If there's something that is fairly unique or is a particularly well-made point, that can really help lead you in. Suzanne, I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I'm going to look at my a list here and be very clear about things. So before you get to any work experience, which should be unless it is absolutely earth-shatteringly relevant, what you should actually, your content should include are these things. An explanation of why some visual materials you have seen really interest you. An account of how your understanding of visual materials, and we are very democratic about that, right? How that has been affected, let's say, by reading an article or a book. And this doesn't have to be about art history. It could be a novel that has changed the way you look at visual material, actually. We want a description, that core material, that sort of heart of the matter. We want a description in there of how you have become interested in the subject. Remember that UCAS applications can be very general. You might apply to all kinds of, let's say, art histories across the board, but maybe you want to be specific about some of these issues where you're targeting a place like the Courtauld, where the hands-on, very close work with objects is such a strong point. So you want to tell us, for instance, how you have become so interested in the subject, and what other subjects actually you have studied that could help you in pursuing this area, pursuing history of art. So for all I care, you can be a great mathematician and become a great art historian. Find a way to tell us, what does that mathematics background do for you to get involved in a field like history of art? We're looking at critical thinking. That's what we are interested in the end, and your passionate interest, personal interest. And in the end, it's that sort of a clear sense of your motivation, of your ambition, of your potential to really excel and to benefit from this project. We are interested in knowing that you will benefit from being in our program. We're not just looking for, bringing in as many students as possible. We're really looking to see if you're a good match for the Courtauld, and if the Courtauld, in fact, is a good match for you. So those are the key issues. And as Alex said, that first sentence, opening sentence, which is succinct and clean and punchy perhaps, and that conclusion, which is very clear and clear-minded, are really important in that. The work experience could be a small portion of it. So think about these in terms of, I'll devote that many characters to this point, that many characters to that point, and so on and so forth, so that you don't pour everything in, say, a work experience that would not necessarily show us how personally, passionately you're involved in this, and how much you want this, and how well prepared you are for this. Okay?
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
I think so, yeah. And actually, the next question kind of ties on as well too, about including thoughts about discussions around social issues, current social issues, in related art.
So, if I may, we are very, very deeply involved in issues that have risen to the top these days. They have always been there. They've always been of interest to us, but clearly you can no longer just do it as an aspect of your research and teaching. It has really permeated our thinking as a community. It applies to our students, it applies to us teachers, it applies to us staff members of the Courtauld. So if it is relevant to why you want to come to the Courtauld, why you want to study art history, by all means, you should speak to those if you feel passionately about it. And I can tell you, we are engaged in things like attempting, we have a number of faculty who's teaching is very alert to the social issues that have risen to the top these days. Many of us teach in areas that deal with Orientalism, with colonialism, with post-colonial issues, with matters of, for instance, the coronavirus having unleashed some really problematic issues about the Asian disease and diseases of Asia and so forth. We're very alert to all of that, very involved in analytically thinking about these things. And if you feel that's important to the reasons for you to be really seeking a university degree in art history, which I think is a very legitimate way of thinking, do talk about them. Or if you feel that you can contribute to the betterment of our understanding, by all means. I think we are not at all discounting anything at this point. It's a personal statement. Remember, it's your personal statement.
Thank you very much. We have a question next about when applications should be submitted by, the deadline for that, and about whether or not that might be changed by COVID-19. So in terms of the deadline, you have up until the 15th of January. There's another question shortly that feeds into this. I'll combine it with that too. But firstly, to mention COVID-19, I think the best thing to do would just be to look at the UCAS website for any updates and any changes. I think my anticipation would be that application deadlines probably won't be changed, because delays and other things wouldn't necessarily have an impact on actually getting your application in. It'll be more likely, should the situation continue and there are other impacts and so forth, it'll be more this kind of the period that we're in now in the cycle that will be impacted. So deadlines and dates might change on that side, but the best thing really to do would be to just check the UCAS website periodically. Once you've actually started an application or once you've signed up, you should get email updates from UCAS with anything like that too. So it's probably the best thing to do to kind of, as soon as you can, get started on that, so you're getting those emailed updates also. To tie it into a question that's following up too about submitting your application early and the kind of timing of such things like that. We tend to review and make decisions on the vast bulk and majority of applications after the deadline. We do sometimes make a few early offers to those students who are from those kind of contextual offer criteria and the background, underrepresented backgrounds that I mentioned earlier. So if you are from, it tends to be things like what, types of school that you may have studied at, or if you have any experience in care, things like that. We may sometimes make a few early offers, but the vast majority will be after the 15th of January. So there's no express rush to get an application in. You can take your time and really make sure that it's as strong as it can be. I'd encourage that. Mm-hmm. Okay, the next question I think about kind of about work experience again. Yeah. If it's been cancelled included. I mean, I think it speaks to what you said, Suzanne, about it being relevant and the relevancy of it. If it's somehow still incredibly relevant, you may well be thinking of a way to include it. But I think if you haven't been able to really get as much as you hoped that you would get out of it, then perhaps the relevancy decreases.
Yeah, can I go back to that one actually?
Sure.
Alexander writes, if our work experience had been cancelled due to the coronavirus, should we still briefly talk about it in our personal statement? And then Imi, I hope I'm properly pronouncing your name. Do I have to mention work experience at all if it is not relevant, and talk about an article, an exhibition, or an article instead. So I think, just as Alex said, it would be useful for you if it was a competitive work experience that was relevant to the field that you're entering into. You might briefly mention that due to the pandemic, you missed this opportunity. But you have to see, is it worth spending your character's allowance for saying something about a work experience you anticipated and didn't work out? And there are a lot of people in your shoes. I have students MA students who had all kinds of opportunities lost. Kids coming out of all levels of education, our young people are finding themselves in a very difficult place. So remember, this is a shared experience. Mention it if it is important for the purposes of us knowing that you had a particularly good opportunity. And then about whether you should even speak about it if it is not relevant. I tend to think that you should look for ways to speak to that analytical way of thinking, that exhibition or article that changed your mind or made you think differently. Sometimes we really ask, what changed your mind about something? Maybe that's one way to go. We are not necessarily having a tick box next to, here's a work experience. We are looking at the totality. So if it's not relevant, if you think your work in the local, as a local barista is not particularly relevant to this, then talk about that article or the exhibition. We respect all of that. In the end, it's not a checkbox. Remember that one. It's the quality of your argument, the way you show yourself through these words.
Great. Our next question is it helpful to include any positions you fulfilled at school or at college, such as being head girl, for example? It's some of the similar, I think it feeds into some of what you just said about, picking and choosing. I think it's something that you can definitely mention in passing as part of another point. There's no need to spend lots and lots of your precious characters describing the various duties that you fulfilled as part of the role, but certainly when you're talking kind of including bits and pieces as an overall point, I think that's the kind of thing that you would mention there.
Yeah, does it show that you can lead, you can be a team player? Does it show that you can deal with difficult situations? That you know how to work with others? Those are important issues, and there are so many different ways you can present that. But is it relevant? Again, ask that question from yourselves when you're writing these statements.
Absolutely. We haven't got any other questions yet. We'll give a few more minutes. One thing that I don't think we've mentioned that I definitely would like to point out, something that I've noticed occasionally in the last couple of years: do make sure that you check and ask somebody else to check your personal statement before you press the submit button. Little typos and punctuation mistakes, they're not the end of the world, but if they repeat, then it does stand out. So do check it a few times yourself and ask someone else to check it for you as well. Get a second opinion. Definitely something that I've noticed over the last few years, a few that have been punctuated by a few errors. So that's a little tip.
Good point. Really good point. We put a lot of emphasis on writing in art history, so that's one of the greatest points of pride for us, is that our students learn how to write well, how to argue. So yeah, It's impressive when it is neat and clean and polished.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in one way of looking at it is that it's your first piece of work at the university level. You know, it does kind of have an element of that. So definitely worth thinking about, and yeah, asking others to take a look too. I don't think we have any further questions. We'll wait another minute or two, as we do have the time. Is there anything else, any kind of common things that come up, or anything that we might think of? I mean, I think you know, we've spoken already quite a lot about standing out and kind of originality and that side of things. One thing that can be quite repetitious to read when you're looking through hundreds of personal statements is references to you know, textbooks or places or works of art that are particularly common, or shows and exhibitions in major art galleries the year that you're applying. If it's relevant and it's something that you're passionate about or that you can speak to, then of course you can include it. But do be conscious of the fact that there'll be lots of other people who might be mentioning the same things, and it can kind of make you, or you run the risk of melding into the kind of the average if you do that too much. So it's something just to bear in mind and be wary of. That's something that I think both of us have noticed over the years.
I want to put that one in another, through another angle as well. It's a really good point. Without naming any particular examples, to say that there tend to be some packaged almost ideas about how do you apply to an art history program. What are the points you want to make? We read enough of them over the years, thousands of them, to know that this was one of those sort of pre-packaged bullet points. Make sure you do this, make sure you do that. We are looking really to find you, the person behind it. So those packaged ideas, those bullet pointy things, if you talk about this book, or if you talk about this exhibition, or if you talk about this city you visited, or that museum you visited, you've hit the high points. That may be so, but we are not looking for those, actually. We are looking for you and having the experience or those experiences. They don't have to have included a trip abroad, nor necessarily one of the greatest exhibitions of the century somewhere in London. I really want to reassure you that we are very clear-minded and open-minded about your personal statements.
So we've just got a question that kind of feeds into that, actually. Is it okay to mention less traditional or well-known artists or exhibitions that you've kind of introduced in? I think that's exactly what we're attesting to.
Yeah, exactly. If all you could do was to go to your local gallery and look at works of art, that's just as good as if you had gone to Uffizi in Florence. What matters is how you take to that work of art, how you encounter it, how you see it, how you have found an interest in there.
Yeah, and it may well be that that's the thing that is the springboard, not just for kind of just talking about what you've seen, but also what you want to go on and do, and the whole path that you're looking to take. That's a very persuasive thing. If you can take something that's uniquely relevant to yourself and tell us about a kind of journey through to what you want to do and how it all feeds in, that's a very persuasive way of telling us about who you are in the personal statement. So that's exactly the kind of thing that can really work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we've had a bit of time, so I think that's probably all the questions. Suzanne, if there's anything that you can think of that we haven't covered,
no, I think there will be a lot of interesting personal statements to look forward to.
Absolutely, absolutely. We definitely look forward
good luck to you all. It's a terrible thing not to be able to see your faces as we ordinarily do these in person, but who knows, maybe we'll see you back at the Courtauld, and I will see you in my classes in the future. But I wish you all very, very best.
Thank you. We will be, as I mentioned earlier, putting a recording of this up on the Virtual Open Day Hub at the very latest by end of tomorrow. If you have any questions, want to follow up anything, the email address is there as always, and do check out, if you haven't already, the first 2 sessions that we've had as part of this series. But I think that is everything, and in conclusion, thank you and best of luck, and we hope that we will and look forward to receiving and reading lots of fantastic personal statements and applications next year. Yeah. So thank you very much, and goodbye everyone.
Bye everyone.